As we begin this session today, I want to share with you a book that I was very excited about when I first came across it, because it affirms something that is so tremendously important for us to understand. And I've referred to it in my earlier sessions with you, and that is that the mind and the brain are not the same thing. And I might assume, well, everybody knows that, but I have found that it's not true. And when you read articles by local doctors and sometimes scientists speaking about it, they speak about the mind and the brain as the same thing. But fortunately, there are some who know better, who are now beginning to be in a position to influence young doctors and psychiatrists, for instance. And I'm talking about Jeffrey Schwartz, Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz, who is a professor at the UCLA Medical School. And he's written a book, and it's entitled The Mind and the Brain. And I just want to read one section of it for you here, which is actually in the epilogue. He says, "It is telling that the decade of the brain, as the first President Bush designated the 1990s, had that name rather than the decade of the mind. For it was in the brain rather than the mind that scientists and lay people alike sought answers, probing the folds and crevices of our gray matter for the roots of personality and temperament, mental illness and mood, sexual identity, and even a predilection for fine food. In my own profession of neuropsychiatry, this attitude is encapsulated in the maxim, for every twisted thought, a twisted molecule. Any mood, preference, or behavior once ascribed to the way we were raised, or even to freely willed volition, instead came to be viewed as the child of our genes and our neurotransmitters, over which we had little, if any, control. The brain, to be sure, is indeed the physical embodiment of the mind, the organ through which the mind finds expression and through which it acts in the world." This is one of the clearest and definitive books that I've come across that evidences this change that is gradually taking place in the world of our scientists and our medical people, of realizing this important truth, which I may affirm a number of times during these sessions, because it takes a while for us to get out of the old mode of somebody said, "Well, what are you thinking?" You immediately think of the brain, but it's the mind that is doing the thinking, and the brain is the transmitter, transmitting to the body. As we shared in one of our previous sessions, in my book, The 12 Freedoms, I have put a design on the front of the book that is a tetrahedron. And I use that because of the wonderful way in which I was able to relate our teaching to the work of Buckminster Fuller, who said that the tetrahedron is the smallest form that you can find in the physical universe. And I pointed out in the past that I was excited because he said of the 6 vectors, there's actually 12, because you have an inside and an outside to a tetrahedron. And on the front of my book with this tetrahedron, I have put the 12 faculties of mind that I referred to earlier, that I believe it is essential for us to know if we're going to understand the working of the mind. You see, we've all sort of sat back and thought, well, these scientists who are working on probing the brain, they're going to find out things that are going to make life better for all of us. But you and I don't live in the brain, we work through the brain. Where we have to do our work is in the dimension of mind. And only can you understand how to do that work when you realize there are 12 faculties of your mind. That is, the mind has 12 different abilities in which to approach any thought or any situation in life. And those 12 are paired, and so they pair up beautifully with the inside and the outside of the tetrahedron vectors. So on the front of the book I have the 12: will and understanding, zeal and dominion, faith and imagination, strength and order, life and renunciation, love and wisdom. These 12 faculties naturally break into pairs or dyads. And today we're going to talk about the first two of these that I want to share with you. And they are the faculty of life and renunciation. Life is a word that most of us are familiar with. And when we think of that, we usually think of animation, getting up, moving around. But when I talk about life in terms of the mind, I'm not talking about animation, I'm thinking of an idea. What is life to the mind? And my answer to that is that it is our capacity to say yes, to accept something into our framework of consciousness. I call life and renunciation, this dyad of the two faculties, I call it the presence faculty, because it is your life faculty and your renunciation faculty that create your presence of mind. They're the gateway to what it is you carry around in your container of consciousness or mind. Until you say yes to something, it doesn't have any place in your mind. It's like if somebody says, maybe at 12 o'clock, and you really aren't paying any attention at all, and later on you said, what time did he say? Well, it never penetrated because you never said yes. You never affirmed that is something that I feel is important to have in my mind. More importantly, it would be like someone might say to you, it might be a teacher who is having a bad day at the school and says to you, when you gives you back your lesson and says to you, I don't think you're ever going to be very smart with a paper like that. And if you say yes to that idea, you're never going to be smart. You suddenly have allowed an idea to enter your consciousness. You have given it room or presence in your being. It is so important for us to know this because you can decide what it is you want to have in your consciousness and learn to develop in your life what we call a process of affirmations. That is, you decide what you like in your life and you begin to affirm this idea for yourself, which you could say words like, I am intelligent, I am wise, I am successful, I'm capable. And you can say them once, and twice, and 3 times. You can affirm them many times so that it keeps them in the presence of your consciousness. I'd like to say that's all you have to do to make yourself wise and intelligent and any other positive that you'd like to mention. But the fact is, there are other faculties, which we'll be talking about, that determine whether that really becomes a way of life for you. But the point we're making about the life faculty is, until you say yes to something, there is no possibility that it can become a part of your life. And so, the presence faculties are really the faculties of possibility. Now, working with the life faculty, of course, is the renunciation faculty. As we look at each of the dyads, you'll find that one seems to be the active one, and the other seems to be the passive one. This is the way Bucky referred to the two sides of the vectors. He said one is the positive, one is the negative, one is the active, one is the passive. When he used the term negative, he didn't mean bad, he just meant like the poles of electricity. So we have the capacity to say yes to things in our lives, and we have to have the capacity to say no to things that come before us or things we've already accepted and want to release. And our tendency is to say, well, yeah, sure. Okay, so I can say no. Oh, and I can say yes. But what I'm wanting you to know very strongly, you can't take it for granted These are incredible gifts that the creative intelligence has given each one of us. It's given us this mind with the ability to say yes and no. The only reason you can do that is because you have a capacity of mind that you were born with. You can see it in little children. I mean, they're saying yes right away. They're reaching out for things, and they'll say no if they don't want something. Even as infants, we have this ability to say yes and to say no. I mentioned that to say yes is the affirming capacity that we have, and our renunciation is our denial capacity. And sometimes, just as I've said, we should use affirmations and repeat them over and over to get them firmly established in our consciousness. We sometimes have to take negatives to be very strong and about releasing things from our consciousness. Some people in the field of metaphysics feel that denials are not something that they encourage people to use, because what they say is that in the process of denying, sometimes you're actually affirming the presence of it. They're thinking particularly if, let's say, you have a serious illness, like cancer. And so we're saying, I am not a victim of cancer. I do not have cancer. Wanting to use that from the metaphysical concept that your thoughts are going to help to change the condition in your life. But they say sometimes in just saying, no, I do not believe in cancer, you're actually giving power to it in your life. And I would agree with that, except in one instance. It all depends on whether you mean it when you use it. It's exactly like in dealing with the pets that we have. I know you've all experienced this. If you have a cat or a dog, and you find if you say, down Fido, keep on watching television, say, down Fido, Fido is probably not going to move a muscle. But if you turn to Fido and put your attention fully on him and he feels it, and you say, down Fido, in that turn, Fido gets down. And so if you use denials, which I think can be very meaningful in your life, you just want to make sure you mean it when you say it. I do not believe in whatever it is you're wanting to release in your life. These are part of the foundation capacity of our life. In one of our earlier sharings, I've mentioned that these ideas have been the original cause. That is, the divine intelligence, universal intelligence, which most of us think of in our culture as God, has created this idea of us with these capacities of mind, and from the beginning released this idea into our universe, and it has been the cause of all evolution. As we have evolved through physical evolution, these ideas have each helped to shape various areas of our body. And so there are body centers that relate to each of these ideas. They're centers of energy. And so when we talk about the life idea, most metaphysicians understand that this idea through evolution has created our generative organs of the body, which makes sense. They're the ones that give birth to life. But, as I affirmed about the faculties, they only give a possibility. Our generative organs only create a possibility for a birth. And so the same thing is true of the renunciation or the denial faculty. It has created a energy center in the body form that is releases, and so it is related to those organs of our body which help us to release things. For instance, the largest organ in our body for releasing is our skin, which most people don't realize. But those organs in our body are very closely related to one another, the generative and the excretion or releasing energies of the body. That is a fantastic study, and I'm only going to touch upon the portions of the body as we go through this program, but we could do them in much depth, and I do that, of course, in my book, The 12 Freedoms. Well, now we're going to move to the second dyad, which is the dyad of strength and order. Strength and order. They are a part of what I think of as the foundation faculties of mind that underlie all of the rest. Strength is an idea that is so easily misunderstood again, because when I say strength, the general response is thinking of muscle power. And it's natural that we think of, you think of football players, you think of some power equipment that you might have. But strength, just like I said about the life idea, the life is not the energy that we see and experience and call life. Life is really an idea. It is the idea or ability to say yes to things. And the same thing is true of strength. Strength is not the physical expression. Strength is the capacity to stand or persist. It is your ability to stand or persist. We have a word for it. It's called patience. The ability to stand and be still. Actually, when you think about physical strength, you realize that that same thing is true. Because for a weightlifter, they lift a weight, but they have to lift it for a certain amount of time to be recorded as having lifted that weight. And when you think about ability, you say that's a strong building. What you really mean is it's able to stand under all circumstances. And you have a capacity, and I have a capacity in mind to be able to persist or stand in the performance of anything in our lives, whether it's in our thinking processes or in our daily activities. We have the ability to persist. Perhaps as you're listening to this, you're thinking, well, I'm one of those people, I just can hang in there until the job is done. And on the other hand, you may know some people that say if things don't come around in a hurry, they're out of there, they're gone. And in those instances, you can know they lack their capacity to use their gift that God has given them, that is to persist or to stand in mind. To stand in mind. I like that because as I say that to you, I think of a weightlifter again, and they're holding this, let's say they're lifting 1,000 pounds, and they're holding that, but it's in their mind that they're doing the work. They're saying, hold it, hold it, hold it. And they do, because they have the capacity to persist. And in a less physical way, but in the dimension of mind, when you think, I want to be loving, I'm going into a difficult situation and I want to be loving here. And you get into the situation and it starts to show things happening that cause you to think about losing your temper or responding in a way you don't want to, but something in you says, no, hold on. Just giving love. That's your strength faculty of mind. The passive or the supportive side for that is order. Because it's one thing to be patient and to stand steady. And it's another thing to be patient or stand steady when you're not on firm ground, either physically or mentally. It's just like every weightlifter knows, the first thing you have to do before you lift the weight is to establish order in your body. You have to have your feet planted right, and you have to have your hands planted right. You're putting order into the situation. And the same thing is true in the mental process of our life. We have to know when it's in order for us to be strong in a situation and persist in our efforts. One of the most personal things, of course, is a divorce situation. Some people stay in a marriage just because they've got strength and persistence. But it wasn't in order, really, for the highest good of both partners, perhaps to have persisted beyond any certain point of time. So we have these wonderful faculties, and we'll pursue them later as we look at them and relate them to our body.